In this video, we're finally going to start putting the pony motor back together on our Model R diesel. So stick with me and we'll show you how to do it. So I mentioned at the end of the oil change video that my crankshaft had come back, so here it is. Here's the results. I mean, the bearing surfaces there look pretty good all the way around, so it looks like the company did a good job. So the name of the company is called Crankshaft Craftsman in Michigan. I'll put a link in the description to that business. So yeah, they did everything pretty good. Took them about a month to get it done, but they're very reasonably priced, and they kept good communication with me whenever I'd ask questions. So came back. So yeah, now we're going to try to put it together. So we'll walk over to the motor there, and we'll show you what we're going to do. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is drive my new bushings into the block for the crank here. So I'm going to take some brake clean and really make sure I get this cleaned up good. This is my old one, so I'm just showing you this for demonstration purposes, but we've got the hole for the oil galley here, and we have to get it lined up with the oil galley here and make sure it's just perfect. So I don't know if I mentioned it in another video or not, but as I was taking this one out, I noticed that the oil galley was only halfway lined up. So that may have been part of my problem from whoever redid this last time. The other thing I've done too is I've taken my new bushings and I have them in the freezer overnight to shrink them down a little bit to hopefully help me drive those in a little bit easier. Then I'm going to, once I get this cleaned up, I'm going to put a little bit of assembly lube around in here and around my bushings so that those drive in nice and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will show you the results. So stay tuned. All right, I've got my bushing in there. That went in rather easily. I actually slid my crank in there off camera to show, just to see how it fit, and it seemed to fit really well. So that's all good. So now I'm going to go ahead and install my seal the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera, and then I'll show you the result. Guess I should show you this before I install it. So there's this seal only goes one way, so you can see there's, like, I'll call it a deep end and a shallow end. The deep end goes in towards the engine, the shallow end goes out toward the flywheel. So that's the way we're going to install that. So I'll check back with you in a minute. All right, our seal went in pretty easily. That driver set has been a lifesaver for doing stuff like this. So now we're going to go ahead and clean up the other end and drive in our other bushing. So stay tuned, and I'll show you once that's in. All right, I've got my bushing driven in. That went in pretty easy. Oil galleys are lined up. So now we can actually go ahead and insert our crankshaft. So I'm going to stick the crankshaft all the way in. I have to be careful because I have that seal on the back end, so I'm going to make sure I use plenty of assembly lube during the process and slide that crank in as straight as I can so I don't damage that seal. Then I can go ahead and slide this on the front, and we have to check for end play, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute here. So hang tight. All right, I've got my crank slid in the one end. One thing I forgot to mention is there is a thrust washer that needs to go in here. So in order to get that thrust washer in, you want it to sit, there's a little, basically a cup, put it go in here, and there's that notch it has to sit in. That's how it sits flush. Don't try to put the thrust washer in and then try to put the end cap in here, because it won't sit down in that groove and you're going to have a heck of a time. So you have to put it on like this and slide it in. Once you get it slid in, bolt it down, and then we're going to check for end play, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. All right, so I have my crank in there and bolted down, and as you can see, it's tight. I have it lightly bolted, didn't torque it down, but I have no movement on the crank right here, so no end play. So the kit came with 2 of these 5 thousandths gaskets. Okay, so per the manual, you need to have 5 to 10 thousandths end play. So we're gonna unbolt this, slip one of those paper gaskets under there, and then recheck. And I'll show you how that looks. All right, I have one of my paper gaskets in place. You can see they're very thin, so be very careful putting those on. Just, easy does it. Now we're going to go back and bolt this back on and check our end play. So stay tuned. All right, I've got my paper gasket in there. And I've got, hopefully you can see that, I've got my 5 and 10 thousandths feeler gauge. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully you can see this on camera here, is I'm going to go down there between the crank and the thrust washer and check to see if I can get my 5 thousandths in there. So let's see here. It's going to be tough to do with one hand, but we're going to do our best. All right. So there it is. Our 5 thousandths fits in there. Now I'm going to put the camera down and grab my 10 thousandths here again, and I'll show you to see if the 10 thousandths fits in there. 1 second. All right, we have our 10 thousandths now. Let's see if we can get down there. All right. And come on, get some light. And I cannot fit my 10 thousandths in that gap. So that means we're between 5 and 10 thousandths end play there. So you can see, you know, it moves a little bit in and out. We're between 5 and 10 thousandths, so we're good to go. So now we can go ahead and move on to the next step. I'll catch you back up and I'll show you where we're at. Guess I'll show you this too before we get too far away. So now I can rotate my crankshaft. It rotates freely. Doesn't feel like there's any rough spots. It rotates smooth all the way around. So I think we're in good shape. Seems like our Crankshaft Craftsman did a good job here so far. So all right, we'll move on to the next step. 1 second. One important step I forgot to note. You see how there is a metal, call it a metal spacer, whatever, metal washer, whatever. You want to take the ends and peen them over so that they're against the flat portion of those those bolt heads there, though. That helps keep these bolts from backing out. So we're going to do that on all 3 of these. That's the way it was when I first took it apart. So that's the way we're doing it now to put it back together. So we'll move on to the next step after I do that. Our next step is actually going to be getting the pistons back in and onto the crankshaft. So I still have my old rings on there, so you can see I took one off already. I'm going to have to take off the other 2 and then get this cleaned up the rest of the way. I already have it cleaned up from the outside, but I'll clean out the grooves there for the pistons, and then I will show you how the rings go back on. So bear with me while I clean that up, so stay tuned. All right, I've got my old rings out and my piston cleaned up as best I can. Just for fun, I took a measurement on my old rings. I went right here 90 degrees to the opening there. See how thick they were, and these were at 110 thousandths. Yeah, my new ones are at 120 thousandths, so those old ones were worn down a bit. So this should make a compression difference on that there pony. All right, so we have 2 compression rings, and we have 1 oil retaining ring. Okay, so the compression rings, they're labeled top. Focus. There we go. Labeled top, so that means those go up towards the top of the piston. Both of them have that. They're identical. The first 2 are identical, so they both, they're interchangeable. Then we have our oil retainer. We've got this guy, and we've got the 2 retaining rings on either end. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my oil retainer rings first, since it's the farther down, and work my way up, and I'll show you once we get it done. So stay tuned. All right, I've got all my rings in. Something to note too, so you see we've got our piston end gaps there. We want those to be away from each other, never lined up. Same goes with the oil retainer down there too. So we want to try to get our gaps away from each other, because that'll create a loss of compression. So as I install these, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that they're opposite each other as much as I can, and then we'll go ahead and install it. So next step is we're going to slide this into the engine. So I do have a ring compressor I'm going to try out, but it might be too big for this piston. This is pretty small. It's only a 2.6-inch bore. So I'm going to go ahead and give everything in here a nice healthy dose of assembly lube before I put it in there. And yeah, I'll take it over to the block and I'll show you what's going on over there. All right, I've got my ring compressor on the piston. I've got assembly lube all up in the cylinders. I lubed up the piston itself. Something to note too, I don't know if you can see that in the picture, but there is an arrow. It's on the lower left right there. That is to point towards the front of the engine, so this way, away from the flywheel, okay? Goes towards the front. So we're going to go ahead and get our piston in there, and I'll show you once it's in. All right, we got our piston in. So what I did is I pushed the piston as far as I could with the compressor up against the block there. I just took the butt of my hammer and stuck it in there and gently patted on it with my hand until the piston popped in. You just have to be careful doing that in case the rings are getting hung up. They don't break something off. But as you can see, mine went in without problem. So there we go. All right, I'm going to flip around to the other side, and we're going to work on tightening up the rod. So stay tuned. All right, we got piston number 1 in, and we've got our rod caps tightened down. I don't have them torqued yet, but we're ready for the torque wrench. So we have to torque these to 15 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll catch you up when we're done. All right, first piston is all torqued down. Yeah, it seems pretty good. Everything seems to move. I was able to do a full revolution. Everything moves nice and smooth. So now we're going to do the second one. It's going to be the exact same process, so I'm not going to show you unless I run into any problems. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get that done, and we'll show you once we have it completed. All right, the crank is in. I've rotated it by hand. It moves pretty freely. You can feel those rings are tighter than it was before. So yeah, it's looking good. So now we will move on to actually setting the valves. So I'll catch you up as we're doing that. All right, so in order to check my valves, I need to get my camshaft back in up there. So I'm gonna, I've cleaned that all up, cleaned up both of the riding surfaces for the camshaft. I'm gonna put some assembly lube in there to make sure it's greased up. I also put some 3-in-1 oil on my followers there, so that's good. I also need to put on the gear on my crankshaft, and then I have to put on my oil gear. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how to time the camshaft with the crank once I get it in. So just stay tuned there 1 second. All right, so I've got a fresh Woodruff key. I've actually had that in the freezer overnight, like I did with my bushings. That way I can get it back in. Should slide right in here. I might have to give it a little tappy, but that's got to go in there. And then I have to take my my gear and slide it over and make sure to get it in that keyway slot and send it home. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll catch you up when I'm done there. Alright, so I got my gear down there on the crank. Now, hopefully you can see this, but there's a V on the camshaft, and there is a V on that top tooth pointing up there on that gear there. So you need to have that V that's pointing up there in line with that V there when you're putting your camshaft in. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that in and show you once it's in. But that's what you need to do in order to time your crank to your cam. So there's no chain on this, it's all gears. So that's how that works. All right, there we go. Camshaft is in, fully seated. We have our V's lined up, so now we know our crank and our cam are in time. So now we're going to go ahead and put our oil gear on along with the parts for our governor on there. So I'll get those all together, then I'll bring you back. Alright, it's actually really easy to adjust the valves on these. So I've got it set so it says to do the right-hand cylinder, so I believe this is the right-hand cylinder, so as you're sitting on the tractor, this would be on the right-hand side. I have it so that we're at top dead center here. You know that it's at top dead center because you can see neither of the cam lobes are actually engaging the followers there. So all we have to do is, well, we can check it initially. So we need 10 thousandths clearance between the head of that nut and the top of the valve there. So you can see if we can, yeah, on this one it's a little tight actually, and so is the other one. So really all we have to do is we take a 1/2-inch wrench and we put it on here on the follower, and a 7/16 down here, and we can loosen or tighten that at will. So that's a self-locking nut, so we don't have to worry about any really holding it too tightly there to adjust. So all we have to do is turn that in and out. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust these to 10 thousandths, rotate the flywheel 360 degrees, and go ahead and do the other side. So then we'll have those set. So I'll catch you up when we're done. All right, we got all our valves adjusted. Pretty easy, like I said. I didn't show you before, but I went ahead and I put on my my governor gear here. So just want to make sure that everything moves freely like this does here. This was sticking a little bit at first, and I discovered there was a burr on there. So I pulled this piece out and I deburred it. But now that moves nice and freely. So our governor's going to work properly. Now, unless I'm mistaken, I believe we're good to put our timing cover back on in our gasket here. So I'm going to make sure our gasket surface is cleaned on both ends here. And I'm going to go ahead and put our timing cover back on. So I will catch you up once I've done that. All right, our timing cover is back on. Yeah, there was a bunch of short bolts and 2 long ones, so you just have to remember that. Also, it doesn't say to do it, but I torqued these in a circular, or a cross pattern, so I did that one, then that one, then that one, then that one, and so on all the way around. And I did it twice, kind of like when you're putting on a tire, just to make sure that all those surfaces sat down evenly and everything like that. So that's good. So now I think I'm going to work on getting my magneto timed and in, so I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So actually, before we time the magneto, I'm going to go ahead and put my flywheel back on, because that's going to aid in timing the magneto, because I'm going to have to turn it, and it's going to make it easier to turn it with the flywheel on there. So anyways, again, there's a keyway that goes in there. I went ahead and I had that keyway in the freezer overnight to help it get in there, and I just tapped it in there. Going to put our flywheel on, tap that in place, and then put our nut on, and or put that washer behind it, and then the nut on, and then peen over the edge of the washer to help lock the nut on. So I'll show you once that's complete. All right, flywheel's on, nut is installed. I got that snugged down really good, and I have our edges peened over there. So now we'll set the motor back down, and we will get back to work on timing that mag. So I'll catch you up in a second. All right, guys, here's how this works. We need to get the right-hand cylinder, which is this one, at top dead center on the compression stroke, okay? So you can see the piston is in the middle, so near top dead center. It's on the compression stroke because you can tell none of the valve lobes are hitting the followers. So now we have to look on the flywheel, and there's a mark that says impulse and a dot. Okay, so hopefully we can see that on the camera here. But there it is. It says impulse, and there's a dot. And then there's a dot, whoops, right there. There's a dot on the casting. So it's hard to show you here, but those are lined up. So that means we're at complete top dead center. So now, based on that, the slot in our magneto coupling should be horizontal. So let's take a look. So there we go. That is horizontal. All right. So now I will set up and bring it to the next step. 1 second. All right. So now we need to get the magneto timed so that the impulse trips when the engine on the right side, the piston on the right side is at top dead center of the compression stroke. So I've got a plug wire in my top post on the magneto. I've got my spark plug set on the block so that it is shorting out, or touching the block, and I should see a spark in there. So hopefully you can see that, but what I need to do is rotate the magneto clockwise, and you're going to feel the impulse trip, okay? So when that impulse trips, I need to watch for spark on that plug. So that means it would be sparking on this side if the motor was all put together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it. I can feel the impulse spring is ready to trip. I'm going to trip. Okay, I didn't see spark, so that must mean the bottom would have sparked that time. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it another 180 degrees. I can feel the spring. Now I'm going to watch. And I got a spark. There, we got it again. Okay, so now that means that would have sparked when this piston was at top dead center. So now my lugs are horizontal just as they would be over here. Okay, so now I can go ahead and mount the magneto on the tractor just like this. Don't forget there's a gasket that goes on here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that gasket and get that all bolted up. And then we'll check it again once I get it on to make sure I did it right. So I'll show you then. All right, mag is installed. Spark plug wire's in the top socket on the magneto. Got a spark plug back on the block. Now we're going to try to rotate the motor again and see when the impulse trips. And if I put everything back together straight, this should trip and spark right when this piston reaches top dead center and my marks are aligned over there. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it slowly and watch for that mark and see when it trips. All right, here we go. Okay, I heard it trip. I didn't get to see if it sparked, but the marks are lined up, so I'm going to go ahead and rotate it all the way back around again and see if I can see spark. Okay, no spark there, so that should mean the other side sparked. So I'll come back around to this side. Okay, we're getting close. Boom, spark at top dead center. All right, our mag is timed. Now, I think I'm going to work on getting the back side of our pony together, get the transmission back on. So stay tuned and I'll show you how we do that. All right, time to get the rest of our clutch back together here. So I had to consult the manual with this one since it's been over a month since I've done it, but I think I got it all straightened out. So we need to put our springs on. 1, 2, 3. Need to put our clutch pad and pressure plate on there, just like so. Now we can take this guy, put him on here, push down, and get all of these, here we are, all of these bolts in there and tighten down and get this wire threaded through all of them. So I'm not going to bore you with that, but that's how it goes back together, and I'll show you once it's completed. So stay tuned. All right, everyone, we got that all back together. So that's going to be it for tonight. I'll have to pick you back up in the morning and I'll work on getting the rest of this put together. And then we'll work on getting it on the tractor. So I'll catch you back in the morning. Good night. All right, it's the next morning. We're back. We're going to continue working on our pony motor here. So actually, before I attach the transmission there, I'm going to go ahead and I still need to replace the gaskets in here on my water inlet and outlet going through there. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those. Nothing to see there, same thing as before. I'm just going to unbolt those, clean up the surfaces, slap the new gaskets in there and bolt them back on, and then I'll bring you back when we're going to put the transmission together. So stay tuned. Alright, I got my gaskets in, and that's all set, so now it's time to put the transmission back on the pony itself. So here's the problem I'm going to run into. The clutch pad in there moves around in there, right? And I got to have it pretty well centered to get the shaft from the transmission in there. So I can kind of get it set in place. Man, I'm getting buzzed by flies. I can try to get it set in place and stationary, but I'm going to have to try to just like barely ease it in there. So it's going to be a wrestling match. If somebody knows a good way to do that on something like this, please let me know, because I don't. So I'll see how long this takes me to get it in there. So I'll catch you up once I get it connected. So I'll see you in a bit. Alright, so here's what I wound up doing. I wound up hanging the engine itself halfway off the pallet there, and it worked out perfectly where the mag could hang off, not hit the ground. And I pretty much had it straight up and down, so that allowed me to center my clutch disc right in the middle. And I just picked this up and muscled it in there. It's not light, and it's awkward because got this big old heavy thing hanging out the side here, but it only took me 2 tries and I got it in there, and everything's bolted up. Everything seems to be moving. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the pony back down and take care of a couple more odds and ends before we lift it into place. So I'll bring you back once I lay it down. Alright, we got this heavy monster laid back down. She's getting heavy now. Something else we have to do. This is the drain plug for the pony that's right into the block. About an inch and a half down, there's a rubber O-ring in there, and our gasket kit came with a new one. So I'm going to go down there and fish that out with a pick, and we'll try to get the new one in place down there. So I'm going to get that in place and catch you back up with the next step. All right, yeah, with a little help from these picks, that O-ring came out pretty easily, and I was able to get the new one in place. So there's the old one. Hopefully you can see that, but the new one's in place in there, so that's good. I'm going to leave the heads and the intake off when I lift the pony in place, just because there's the intake over there. You see we still got the carburetor and everything else on there, a bunch of stuff hanging off. So this will make it a lot easier to lift it in place and, you know, not get hung up on some of these wires and cables and stuff up there. So the only other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to oil up our transmission here. You can see we got the little flapper cap around there, so I'm just going to take some 3-in-1 oil and fill that up. But yeah, that's going to be it for today's video, and the next video will be lifting the pony motor in place and getting everything hooked up and doing our firing it up for the first time. So thank you for watching so far. Please subscribe. That would help me out a bit, and we'll catch you in the next one. Later.